Hello and welcome everyone. We are super excited to have you here for today's webinar, How to Choose the Right Virtual Classroom. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to log in and then we'll get started here momentarily. All right. Well, hello again to everyone who's dialed in today. My name's Daniel Caselli. I'm part of the K-12 partnerships team here at Class, and we're super grateful to be spending some time with you this afternoon. And before we dive into today's discussion around the virtual classroom and how to think about evaluating virtual classrooms, we do have a couple of quick housekeeping items. So my goal is going to be to breeze through those, and then we'll dive right in. So couple quick items before we start. You'll see our agenda on the screen here today that's going to guide our conversation. We don't have a ton of slides, and we're going to hold a good bit of time at the end for Q&A. We'd love to keep this a discussion back and forth. Everybody always asks this, so we do want to note that we are recording this session. If you have colleagues that couldn't join us today, we'll record the session and share that out with the group in follow-up, in addition to any of the slides or content that's shared. We also want you to know that if you look at the bottom of the Zoom window, you'll see two different options for engaging during this conversation. The first is Q&A. So drop in those questions that this panel can address at the end of the conversation in the Q&A portion. And feel free to use the chat throughout the discussion as well. And that'll help make it easy for us to interact with the group. And lastly, of course, this conversation is just a primer. We'd love to hear from you all personally. Reach out to us, reach out to our team if today's conversation sparks questions as you're thinking about applications for virtual learning in your own school or district. So with that, I want to introduce my colleagues who are with me today. As I mentioned, my name is Daniel Caselli. I work on the K-12 partnerships team. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues today, and I'm going to give them each a chance to introduce themselves and a little bit about their background. Dr. Massey, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Elfrida Massey. I am currently the Vice President for K-12 Strategy with Class, and I have been formerly a superintendent of schools. I've served in a number of different capacities, starting from a teacher, professional development and training, and I've worked in school systems in Maryland and in DC, and I've also had experience designing instruction and professional development and training for a number of organizations, and even more recently, training principals and superintendents on some executive development programs focused on ways to improve instruction and ways to redesign education. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. Really excited for the shape and scope of this conversation today. Jason Bedford, the VP of K-12 here. And I've invested the last 25 years at the intersection of teaching and learning and technology. Started my career in the classroom, and I think through all the different leadership roles I've had in ed tech firms, I've really always focused on how we equip and enable teachers, how we build student engagement, and build a lifelong love of learning. Before coming to Class, I was a managing partner of Education Elements, a consultancy where I had the privilege of doing learning walks, and specifically virtual learning walks throughout the pandemic, and in some of the nation's largest school systems. And working with district leaders became truly evident to me that there's just such a great opportunity to redesign for the future of learning. And we were doing so much awesome upskilling and reskilling of teachers to accommodate the new virtual settings we were living in, and the platforms were blockers. They were not enabling instructional models to be carried forward. There was, and so joining the Class team here has been a privilege, and looking forward to sharing some of our learnings with you all today on virtual classrooms. So Daniel, pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Elfrida. So we do have a quick poll as a warm-up for the group here on your level of engagement. And as you all know, our topic today is really about thinking through the qualities of a virtual classroom. And so presumably you're here because you're already using a virtual classroom. So let's see if we can get some feedback from the group here on which virtual classroom or video conferencing platform your district or school is using today for remote learning. All right.
I feel like I should sing the Jeopardy song.
Yeah, exactly.
Looks like we're getting a couple results in.
That's right. While you're doing that, it's nice to see that we have people from across the country. And I see some of my neighbors here online from Maryland, which is great.
Awesome. So we'll cap the poll there. And it looks like our winner today was Zoom, closely followed by Google Meet with some other in there. That could be a whole host of different options, maybe Adobe Connect or Blackboard Collaborate or some of the other virtual platforms out there. Thanks for the feedback today. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. And what we wanted to do was really set the stage for today's conversation. And Jason really alluded to some of the things that went on during the last 18 to 24 months in terms of disruption in the K-12 space, some of the challenges. And we wanted to set the stage for today's conversation to really pose the question to this group about the place of virtual learning long-term, and were there learnings that we can take from COVID-19, the experience that students had, the experience that families had, the experience that teachers had, and use this as an opportunity to think about redesigning K-12 education and specifically redesigning the applications of virtual instruction. And so when we think about why this is important, there's a couple different themes that emerge. One is the flexibility that people have been exposed to. So whether we liked it or not, everybody got a dose of virtual learning. And we quickly learned that for some students, virtual learning was actually really beneficial. Kids that did not thrive in traditional brick and mortar maybe struggled with some of the social constructs of traditional K-12 education. And we also learned that it's really, really difficult for other kids, and other kids did not thrive. And so as districts and schools evaluate what that means long-term, it means an opportunity to think about serving all students with their unique personalized learning needs. And so that's one of the reasons we think this conversation is so important. We also think about the future of K-12 and really the future of the workforce. Many of you do work each and every day through digital platforms. And so as we think about integrating digital instruction into the K-12 environment, we're thinking about college and career readiness. We're thinking about ability to engage in virtual platforms in different work settings and how important that is for young students. And lastly, we want to emphasize the challenge of creating unique educational experiences regardless of the ecosystem that students are learning in. So whether that's in traditional brick and mortar, a blended learning setting, a student who is learning at home, how can we give teachers and students the same experience? And that's really what we want to pose to you all today as we think about why it's important to evaluate the virtual classroom long-term. So with that, we have a whole host of different resources to get you all started on thinking through this topic. I imagine this is a conversation that's actively going on in your school or in your district. And so we'll send these in follow-up for you all to ruminate on this topic a bit further. And we want to pose kind of three look-fors, if you will, in evaluating a virtual classroom. So we've got three specific things that we want to dive into when it comes to evaluating a high-quality virtual classroom. Before we do that, I want to do another quick poll from the group just to get a sense for how people are thinking about virtual classrooms when it comes to the actual application of remote learning. So maybe thinking about this spring, maybe thinking about longer term. Let's see if we can get some input from the group on the place of virtual. All right, a couple more seconds. And all right, it looks like in-district virtual academy was our winner. 67% are thinking through that idea of having a dedicated virtual program or in-district virtual academy. For those of you that selected other, we do have a pretty big contingent of other. Would love for you to drop in the chat how you all are thinking about virtual learning. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, we'll go ahead and dive into, as we mentioned, our three look-fors as we think about evaluating the virtual classroom. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason to kick us off here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Daniel. So when I think about look-fors, I really realize they're derived from learning walks. And look-fors are an integral part of school culture where feedback informs planning cycles, informs growth opportunities to really best serve our learning communities. We're going to look at three of these today, and the one I'm going to speak to is designing like our virtual environments, designing for creativity, connection, and belonging. And we're going to unpack these, and under each of these, creativity, connection, and belonging, maybe identify really specific look-fors that you want to see come to life in your virtual environments, and how selecting platforms and pedagogy are an important confluence in enabling these capabilities. So I'll just start with a little backdrop. A lot of my research comes from the K-12 lab at Stanford's D School when specifically addressing belonging. And Stanford's D School talks about space, role, ritual, process, and communication as 5 core elements in our design efforts to enhance belonging. It's not something that can explicitly be designed, but we can design for belonging. Also, John A. Powell has an awesome quote about your well-being, like what is belonging? And he talks about it in all of his authorship, where he shares that like your well-being is considered, and your ability to help design and give meaning within the structures or institutions is realized. So that's when we have a sense of belonging. And belonging is foundational. It's a foundational component to engagement. Oftentimes in education, engagement is about the lean in factor, or it's about a wrapper that we put around our ed tech solutions. And I would argue that engagement starts with belonging. And so I want to unpack a few look-fors for you all to consider in this idea of belonging. And so the first one would be like, is the environment welcoming? And so that is about active hospitality. As the classroom teacher, as a facilitator, it's not just happening at the beginning of the session, but it's happening throughout the learning experiences. The second would be known or knowing. Like, do we know each other, and are we known as individuals in a learning collective? So it's your identity with peers and with teachers. The third would be participation and contribution. Does my voice matter? Can my voice be heard? And are my ideas widely accepted? Can I contribute? And then this idea of growing, it would be the fourth kind of look for in belonging. Am I growing in the community, and am I growing academically, self-wise? And so as I think about belonging as a foundational component to engagement and how it sits in all of this, it really is our building block. And on the platform side, you start thinking about, can we foster this differently than we have today? Do we have inhibitors to this, or does the platform actually allow this to take life? And in our teacher practice, are these constructs that we expect in lesson design and in our online environments, or are we skipping right and moving very quickly to address a standard? And so I know it's hard to balance everything with a very limited amount of time, but belonging truly matters. And I would just encourage you guys to think about those 4 like sub look fors of welcoming, knowing, participation and contribution, and growing, sitting underneath that. When we talk about collaboration, and connection. Connection is about, for me, it's about collaboration. And some of these look fors to unpack is lesson structures that support collaborative work. The second would be learning experiences that have roles and parts. So we all have a different piece to play, whether we're the note taker, we're introducing the concept, we're providing a dissenting opinion, we're helping solve the problem. We can rotate those roles, but learning experiences that have roles and parts foster collaboration and build these connections. And then the third look for here is interactions that expand boundaries. And this, to me, this expanding boundaries means access to sources of content, to people, to cultures beyond our typical four walls. Virtual has opened up so many opportunities for us. That's super exciting and interesting. Ways to connect the concept we're learning with a myriad of different professions and be able to start seeing the real world application of knowledge. All of these fit into this connection and collaboration bucket. The third bucket of creativity, tremendously important. This is work we all do as educators all the time. So I'll just recap these look fors. But look fors include, encouraging students' interests, choices in the way they demonstrate knowledge, and we can use UDL principles to kind of outline choice. When it comes to possibilities or divergent thinking, like possibility thinking or divergent thinking is an awesome way to unlock creativity, and how you foster that in your classroom has been really hard in a one-to-many platform setting of a virtual video conferencing platform. You feel like if you come off mute, you're singled out. And how do you have this allow creativity to happen in a virtual classroom, and possibility thinking and divergent thinking to happen in small groups with a teacher? And so I'll be kind of looping this back around a bit later to show you where we're making deep investments on the technology side that allow all of these things to be possible. But the last look for here under creativity would be exploration, discovery, and brainstorming. These are just strategies that we want to implement in our classroom. But again, often our selection of technology has limited our ability to do these things. And so as we're thinking about an awesome virtual classroom that we all want to be part of, that we all want to learn in, we're designing for creativity, connection, and belonging. So that's some of the work that's top of mind to us at class, but we want to give you all a few look fors when thinking about your instructional design that you're carrying forward. And it's not just about platforms, but it's about how we interact with the technology as professionals. So I'll turn it over to number 2, which is going to be Elfrida supporting teachers.
Thank you. One of the things that I think we have to think about, no matter what, with any platform, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's virtual online, is that it has to be a platform that was designed specifically to support teachers so that they can do what they do best. And with class, it was designed specifically with students in mind, but also with teachers in mind, so the teachers would be able to deliver as close to a face-to-face experience online as easily as possible. And we know that even in a face-to-face classroom, there are so many distractions for teachers, whether it's classroom management, whether it's doing paperwork, whether it's the interruptions from bells and buzzers and things that are causing distractions for teachers and for students. So we want to have to be in an online platform where there aren't as many distractions. So I'd say a couple things. One, we know that the teacher is key and the teacher as facilitator is key. So with class, it allows teachers not only to work smarter and to work harder, but all of the materials, the teaching tools that they need are all in one location. And many of you, especially in the last year and a half, have been doing training online. And one of the things that I noticed when I was doing training online before working with class is that many times when you're teaching, and I've taught adults and students in this type of an environment, you have to ask people if you're using a platform and you want to show a video, or you want to go to the internet, or you want to give an assessment, that you have to ask folks to either use a second device or to leave the portal and to either go online or to go to another location. What I love with class is that everything that a teacher needs is right there in class, so to speak, in the portal. So for example, if a teacher wants to launch an assignment, or to give an assignment, or to have students go to the learning management system with just the click of a tab, it's all right in front of you. The students are never distracted. There are a few things that I'd like to just kind of highlight. Even the look of the portal for class is different, and it's exciting. So when teachers and students first enter, there is a podium view where all students and all participants can see the instructor, and that instructor is pinned to everyone's page. There's another feature. It may seem like it's small, but those of you who have been doing online training know that the time that it takes to manage attendance, to take attendance, including start times and end times, that is now automated through class, where you don't have to do that, where you will know which students are actually there participating and which students are absent, and also when they entered class and when they left class. Another wonderful feature, I believe, is that without leaving the portal, you can show videos, you can browse the web, you can link to the LMS. And even when you begin the class, just as we took a poll while we were having this webinar, as soon as the class opens, teachers can even take a poll just to see how students are doing. You know, if you think about some of the, just typically when we start class, we don't just automatically jump into, well, here's the curriculum. There's some time that we spend trying to be sure that our students, finding out how they're doing, dealing with social and emotional issues, and just making sure that students have the ability to touch base or to even have one-on-one private conversations with the teachers. And again, they can do all of that without leaving class. Even if the teacher wants to have a one-on-one conversation with the student, they can do that as well. Another feature, another good thing about having the teacher pinned at the top, and there's also a possibility to have presenters, student presenters or other teaching assistants and instructors who are pinned to the front of the class, is what we call it, is that the fact that students are focused, and even that minute or a few seconds where they have to find where people are, or if they have to leave class to get materials, saving those few minutes matters to teachers. So, again, if you look at the slide that we're showing, where in the time that we spend in the classroom, in a typical 40-minute or an 80-minute double period, losing 5 minutes or losing 3 to 4 minutes where students are distracted, we're trying to bring them back to one place. That's valuable time that a teacher does not want to spend. So I'd like to just mention just a few other things in terms of the ease of delivering content. It really makes a difference for teachers in a regular classroom or in a face-to-face classroom. When they come in, they have all of the materials in front of them. They're organized. So with class, if a teacher wants to create an assessment, a formative assessment, let's say to be sure that students are learning what they're presenting, they can do that right there on the spot. And again, they can send a poll to students and get the results immediately. So they might in fact they might begin teaching and want to do a quick check to see if students are in fact learning the materials that they're presenting. They can do a poll, and just based on the student responses at that time, they might decide that I think I need to reteach something, or they might be able to say, I see that some students are having difficulty with a particular piece that they've taught, and they can reteach it right there on the spot. And I think that's very important, because the whole issue of how we do formative assessment, do we determine that student learning? The other piece, there are many ways now for students, even for teachers, determine participation. They can determine in ways. One, the of using to see which are to that. Slow down or the teacher. So again, can do everything on one portal without leaving class, I think is really significant. That anything used,
Hey, Frida. Oh, it
So
looks
I
like
think we actually not just lost audio along the way, but we lost everyone. So we'll just move it along to number 3. Just a recap of look fors in that section. Oh, Ron Pleasant is on the line. I'm super excited. Daniel, you mind taking it away for flexibility across instructional models?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I think just to recap the couple things that have been mentioned already, looking for design, creativity, connection, belonging in your virtual classroom. Does the virtual classroom support teachers and encourage innovation? And then lastly, the sort of third bucket of look fors is around this idea of flexibility of instruction. And I think I would challenge the group to, if you're an administrator, if you're a principal, to think about walkthroughs that you've done in your building. Think about when you step into a classroom and you see a really innovative lesson structure, or you walk into a station rotation going on where students are working through differentiated content. Or a teacher is trying out a flipped classroom model. Students are coming in having watched a pre-recorded lesson. They're getting broken out into discussion groups, maybe having a kind of a Socratic seminar format. All of these different pedagogical tools that we use to create unique learning experiences. I think one of the biggest challenges that we heard from teachers during COVID was we're limited by the structures of virtual learning to create these types of meaningful experiences for students. And so I think this last category of look fors is a challenge to the group to say, in our virtual lessons, when students come into the virtual classroom, do we see this type of creativity, this type of innovation, this type of lesson structure design that is best practice in brick and mortar? Or is there a different experience depending on which modality a student finds themselves in? And so some of the things that we would challenge you to look for is our teachers, look for teachers' ability to do what they do best being limited. So is their ability to implement classroom management strategies limited? Is their ability to deliver content in a lesson plan structure limited? You want to look for student engagement. So are students participating? Does the virtual classroom feel like a college lecture where a professor is talking, 98% of the time, and there's some, maybe a brief portion of open Q&A? So I think the big challenge to the group in this last bucket is you want to look for flexibility and capability in the virtual classroom so that teachers don't feel like they're changing their lesson plans or having to completely reimagine lesson plans because they're limited to, coming on and off mute or only sharing content through a screen share. And so those are just a couple things to be looking for as you all evaluate the virtual classroom and what the virtual classroom can do for students that thrive best in that modality. And so as we think about those kind of 3 buckets of questions to work through as you're evaluating a virtual classroom, we also wanted to share a little bit on the practical side, and Dr. Massey got into this a little bit just in terms of some of the things we're doing to move from theory to practice. So it's one thing to say, oh, a teacher should be able to do a station rotation in a virtual class. It's another to do that practically. And everyone on this call, I'm sure, has seen creative ways that teachers made meaningful experiences happen over video conferencing. And so we wanted to share just a couple different things that we're doing here at class. And we'd love your feedback, frankly, on some of the platform redesign. So we'll highlight just a couple different things for this group that might spark questions or ideas, and then we'll move into a portion of Q&A. Before we do that, we've got one more poll for the group. As you all reflect on virtual learning, what do you think was the biggest challenge And so we've got a couple different options there.
I know I'm certainly having a hard time picking the biggest challenge, right? I feel like a lot of these were things we have struggled with. Wow, overwhelming votes for keeping students engaged. Tracking participation, delivering content, classroom management, all definitely got some votes, but the large majority of the votes came in for keeping students engaged. And we know that's a challenge when we're in person and our spidey senses going off in the class, and we're able to observe with more of our senses, and we lose so much of that when we went virtual. So that's, and plus the self-discipline to stay involved with your classmates. And I think that's part of the reason we started with some of the constructs around a sense of belonging, creativity, participation, some of those earlier components. So thanks everyone for weighing in on that. That was awesome. Since Dr. Massey is no longer connected via internet, I'm gonna grab this section, just share with a little bit on what's been going on at Class Technologies. And so through the pandemic, we were able to interview thousands and thousands of teachers to really understand what their challenges were in virtual teaching. We all had a very personal experience, and we also had shared learnings that came from this. And this really informed our design. And at Class, we are built on Zoom, but it is an essential synchronous learning application. And when we think about everything that teachers need to be able to effectively deliver instruction and have deep engagement, and all of the things that students want to experience with their classmates. And so we take this idea of video conferencing and have been really thoughtful about the hundreds of features that need to exist for teaching and learning to feel both interpersonal, more deeply connected, increasingly relevant, and just easier to deliver at the end of the day. So this screen shares some general gaps on some of the tasks, like attendance, assignments, quizzes, group presentations, sharing internet. Like we all drop things in a chat and we lose everybody as they go on to do that thing. And bringing everybody back at the same time, now it's a classroom management challenge. So this is just a quick snapshot in some categories on what we feel like we lost when having to use the video conferencing software that was available to us. So at Class, we've been hard at work at this, and it is a design for educators. Like the technology we are building is about the classroom needs for virtual today and about the redesign possibilities for tomorrow. And we recognize learning continuity has been a conversation over the last 12 months as we've ebbed and flowed out of different situations. We've been in high flex or concurrent learning environments, and Class is designed to enable and equip all of those. But as we look forward to the future, we really see a future that we recognize that there's inequities in our systems of education today. And that if we're going to redesign systems, we need to create more flexible options for learners, that we can be inclusive of all learners. And that might mean that the modality of that instructional delivery is going to change. It might mean the time or the place of that instructional delivery is going to change. It might take us longer to learn a concept. And because a class period is over in 45 minutes and the next standard needs to be taught the next day, we don't have that flexibility in our structures today. And so as leaders, I would love you to leave this session feeling inspired, not just have a set of look-fors around advancing high fidelity virtual or high quality virtual classrooms, but also a sense of inspiration around what's possible around the corner. We're all super tired right now, and we also know that we have ample opportunity to redesign. We know that teacher recruitment is increasingly challenging. Teacher retention is increasingly challenging. How do we create more flexibility for teachers? How do we create more access to courses that students might want to take, but we just don't have the enrollment numbers to support? And so there's a couple key categories in this designing the future of learning, design the classroom. Flexible, accessible, and personalized would be kind of those three words. But the underpinning story is the deep empathy for learners that might have been marginalized, learners that the system doesn't work for, or they're struggling and they don't have access to, or the teachers that need different things. How might technology play an accessible role to redesign? And if video conferencing in its new instantiation can set up capabilities that allow for deeper connections between learners and teachers, that's going to be a game changer. And that's the work we're about. So I think we'll just kind of close our section out here by talking about a few of our favorite features that relate back to our key look for. So Daniel, I'll pass it over to you if that's all right. And Alfreda, you want to jump in? I see a quick note in there. Welcome back.
I apologize. I don't know. I can't say that I can explain what happened, but I'm glad to be back. And I'm sure that one of my colleagues picked up word for word with whatever I was saying. So I'm just going to add to something that you mentioned, Jason, and then talk about my favorite feature. And that is that one of the things that we have known that has been an issue in all schools is thinking about how to create equitable learning opportunities for all students. And when we think about all students, we're thinking about kids who might be homeless, kids who might not be able to attend school because of physical disabilities or other limitations, students who may have even been suspended, or kids who are on the verge of dropout. And how do we create options and alternatives for all students? And I think the fact that we can't unknow what we've learned, we can't unlearn what we've learned about the importance of technology. I think technology in and of itself isn't important, but I think the fact that technology is here to stay, if we can think about ways and think about this moment in time and use it as an opportunity to redesign education in a way that students who typically, as you were saying, Jason, who typically weren't as successful coming into a traditional classroom, ways that they can succeed. There are some students who actually did succeed and who thrived in a virtual environment. And we're hearing now, of many instances where parents and teachers and families are saying that, there are some things about a virtual environment that they thought were better. In fact, there's some students who have said there's less bullying, there's fewer microaggressions. We have parents who have said, in a virtual environment, I don't feel intimidated about coming into the building. So I think these are issues that we've been trying to address for many years. And this is an opportunity that we can think about, so how can we consider virtual opportunities for learning that would be here to stay, not just as kind of a quick fix or a Band-Aid for an emergency situation? How can we think about students who can't come to the building for a variety of reasons? And how can we provide for them the same high quality learning environment that we provide for others? So that gets me to one of the features that I like most, is a feature where we can look at students as a student view by participation. And by that, I mean, sometimes in a traditional classroom, there are students who are shy to speak up. And there are some kids who are overlooked, that the teacher typically doesn't call on them, maybe because for any number of reasons. But with the participation view, teachers have the opportunity to engage all students. So for example, students who have been participating an average amount of talk time and contributing, either through speaking or giving feedback to the teacher, there would be a green box around their name. So the teacher could visibly look at the screen. And if you see a yellow box or a red box or a green box, you know which students who have contributed a great deal in the class during that session, and those who haven't spoken. So those students who haven't contributed and have the lowest amount of talk time, their faces would be visible at the top of the screen. So, and the other issue that addresses is many times in a classroom, kids put their hands up and you don't know who put their hands up first. You're trying to decide, who do I call on? So the fact that in this particular view, should you decide to choose it, you have the opportunity to see students that need to be more engaged, that you want to bring into the conversation. And in a sense, that also empowers students who typically wouldn't speak out to begin to do that more often. And there's a way as well to encourage those students who have been contributing and who have been participating. So that's my favorite, one of my favorite features is this particular view where the teacher can see the students and can have greater opportunities to engage all students.
Well, I guess it's over to me. So I think my favorite feature right now, as it relates to connections and belonging and having a sense of community in your classroom, is this idea of enhanced breakout rooms. And as we've entered breakout rooms in the past, teachers lose line of sight to what learners are doing there. And so you'll notice on this quick screen grab, you can actually see the content they're working on with the students that are in that group. Their chat functions are notated with bubbles on their imagery. If they have their hand raised, you can see that. You can quickly flex in and out as a teacher of any of these breakout rooms. And I think this is even more important because it unlocks learning models that just haven't been possible in video conferencing before. So station rotations, lab rotations, flipped classroom, individual rotation models, flex models, Paideia and Socratic seminars. So many new opportunities to bring everyone's voice and honor everyone's voice into the conversation. The multiple ways of representing what you can have differentiated assets for each and every group. The actions and expressions, the engagement, like multiple means of doing each of these, which are UDL principles that we just haven't been able to do in the past. So breakout rooms are just an awesome way in this redesign possibility to unlock learning models that have blocked teachers from doing some of those creative, engaging things that they've done in the past. So it's a feature that we've invested a lot into, and personally, I think is making such a difference for teachers today.
Awesome. And I'll round us out here with another practical consideration for how we're thinking about redesigning technology. So to orient the group a little bit, one of the things I wanted to call out was this idea of the relationship between the teacher, the student, and the content. And if you think about what happens in a traditional virtual classroom or brick and mortar, either a teacher is screen sharing and all of the students follow along, or in brick and mortar, a teacher is sharing a URL or writing a URL on the chalkboard, and students have their Chromebook in class and they're looking up and navigating to that website. What we did in class is got rid of that wasted space during a class period where students are navigating away to a different piece of content. So in class, you can actually push out distinct pieces of content. So if you think about all the different curricular tools that your teachers might use, your Dreambox Learning, your Nearpod, your Kahoot, all of those can be deployed in a browser that we built inside the video conferencing platform. So students can actually access pieces of content or curricular tools while still seeing their teacher in the top left and their peers at the top of the screen, and actually interact directly in that tab without having to have multiple applications or browsers running. And so we kind of bring things into a single umbrella. And when we're talking about just a specific piece of content, this is not a screen share. And so students can actually interact with this at their own pace. So I think we talk a lot about personalized learning. But practically, every student, for example, is going to read at a different pace if we're talking about a group of students that can read. And so when you push out a piece of content, you want to allow each student to navigate that content at their own speed, digest it at their own speed. And that's one of the things that we felt like was important to incorporate in the virtual classroom. So with that, we'll round up the quick feature highlights of how we're practically redesigning the classroom. And we'd love to open it up to Q&A. And I know we've had a couple of questions come through in the chat here that we'd be happy to address. And I will tee up this first one. Let's see here. Jason, we had a super practical question from Hen about limiting learners in a session. Are the number of learners limited in a class session?
In class, they are. So it's not a full webinar platform where you can have an excess of 300 there. And it is, for us, it's tied to the structure of your Zoom license. So typically 100, 200, or 300 and it is where we're capped out. Great question.
I have a question. Daniel, can you show the teacher dashboard, or I'm just reading the question about that to show more about what that dashboard looks like, either on screen?
Yeah, well, Daniel's popping that up. I'll just do a quick voiceover to that because this is going to make him have to be very flexible since he's not screen sharing.
Okay.
Someone else is. I'm not sure if we can or not, Hen. So, but happy to send you some screenshots afterward if that's easier. But in the teacher dashboard is going to show a bunch of not just attendance information. It's going to show participation data. We have this idea of being able to give gold stars like PBIS. How many times is that occurring? When how many chats are happening? How often are they coming off mic? And so all of these pieces that build to engagement, that we give us a sense of contribution into their learning environments. Those are all the pieces that you see. And so there's a few dozen factors that we're pulling on that help round out that picture. And so we do that with with a visual that gives teachers a quick snapshot on teachers' talk time versus student talk time and some of the basic attributes of participation in their classroom. And we're trying to level up and move on this continuum of, you show up, you have a sense of belonging, then there's participation, that engagement is kind of like the arc of rigor. It's someplace we're going, like a DOK4, and it helps you bring up the arc of rigor actually when you have this nurtured in your classroom. And so all those analytics are visible to you. Sorry, we can't show you right now, but happy to screenshot.
I'll add to that. Another thing that it gives is teacher data as well in terms of the amount of teacher talk time versus student talk time. So it can also be a learning tool for the instructor as well as the student. It also easily shows when, tardiness and absenteeism, when students join the class and when they actually left the class, because many times students come on and when they were distracted, they may be in class, but we have data that shows if they're not actually viewing the class, if they're outside of that portal. So a lot of that data can at least give us information to identify which students might be falling behind, which students need additional support, and even some indicators as to why that's happening. But I think the fact that it also gives teacher data as well, something that teachers can look to. And it also shows, again, by students, the amount of time that they contributed to chats. And as well on the dashboard, if you've done assessments, if you've given a test or a quiz, you also have the opportunity to see what those how the students performed on those as well.
Awesome. We had a great question come in from John. Jason, maybe I'll tee this one up for you. John asked, in some instances, elected officials, both state and local system leaders and teachers feel that virtual learning is not as rigorous as brick and mortar instruction, creating a general resistance to virtual programs. What evidence do you collect or have collected that demonstrates rigor in a virtual program? Really good question.
John, I think you're really keying in on how we're going to shift policy and legislation to support redesign opportunities. And a body of legislators, not all, but are certainly drawing on their own K-12 experiences and projecting that their experiences in the K-12 classroom, like we all have learned, education is a bit of a sacred cow. And so it's hard to think about a different future than we have learned because it worked for us. But we're not all learners. And we look at the constructs of the classroom today, and we need our legislature and elected officials to both understand the rigor component, engagement piece of where we're at, and the importance of this flexibility to shore up public education for the future. And so at class, this is one of the things we very much care about. As a newer organization, we are just starting on this journey to collect and author and sponsor a body of research that's going to look at control groups and treatment groups of in-person and virtual learning, and make sure that their commitment around their education, their ownership of their education is at the same level or higher in virtual worlds than brick and mortar, and also look to learner outcomes. And that's work we're really excited about delving into in the months and years ahead. We haven't sponsored that body of work yet, but there are a few studies that we certainly can point to. Right now, our correlation studies are tied back to Stanford's D School around belonging. They're going to be tied to other pieces of authorship around and research around student engagement and what constitutes rigor. So we're doing correlation work right now with our research, and we will also be conducting research that's going to help us nationally and globally norm around what are these, how do we empower these and unlock these capabilities that our people are reticent to pull us forward into.
When I just add one other thing to that, Jason and John, one of the things I think is important is that we engage in a lot of conversation, because there are many times that people assume that if you're in a brick and mortar classroom, that we're assessing or that we're measuring rigor. First of all, seat time is not rigor. The fact that students show up, and whether you're in a face-to-face classroom or in a virtual environment, again, the teacher, what we are providing teachers are many opportunities to provide rigorous content, global content, not just content and content at their fingertips. So I think when you think about rigor, one of the things that just says, how do you determine rigor in a face-to-face classroom? How do you determine rigor, and how do you determine student learning, and how do you assess rigor in learning? And again, what we provide is the same opportunity or even greater opportunities for teachers to have students in smaller groups, desegregated by, again, by different content, by levels of content. But I want to be sure that we know that quality is not based on the fact that someone shows up in a building or is in a physical classroom. So.
Awesome. Great thoughts from the group, and great question, John. I think that's a super important one for all of us to be thinking about in the coming years. Well, everyone, we really appreciate the time today. We appreciate the questions that have come through the Q&A and through the chat. Thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. And as we said at the beginning, we'll be sending out the recording to this discussion, the slides and the content we shared, as well as links to any of the research that was asked for some of the statistics that were shared. I saw that in the chat a couple different times, as well as information for continued discussion if you'd like to continue this conversation with us. So thank you all for participating today, and have a great rest of your Wednesday afternoon.